"It's an honor to serve you again, Captain," said the alien girl who hadn't aged a day in 15 years asterisk. The shuttle's docking clamps hissed as they sealed against the hull of the ISS Intrepid. A low hum filled the cavernous hangar bay, punctuated by the precise footfalls of deck officers and the distant thrum of the ship's fusion core. The lighting here was sterile, cold, the kind of light that made metal gleam too bright and faces seem older than they were. Captain Daniel Harris stood at the base of the ramp, his boots planted firmly on the Durasteel deck, his right leg humming faintly a sleek, military-grade prosthetic that whispered rather than clanked. The damage he'd taken in the Proxima Centauri War hadn't ended his service, but it had certainly ended something else. He wasn't sure what. Idealism, maybe. He adjusted the collar of his worn brown leather officer's coat, the insignia of the Terran Fleet Command still stitched proudly onto the shoulder. It felt heavier now. "Permission to come aboard," he said, voice low and gravel-edged with time. It carried across the hangar bay like the beginning of a storm. Admiral Reeves stepped forward, hand outstretched, portly and perpetually flushed. He looked like a man more comfortable behind desks than battle lines. "Permission granted, Captain Harris." "Welcome back to active duty." Daniel shook his hand, his grip as firm as it had been 2 decades ago. "Didn't think I'd ever see the inside of a warship again after Proxima." "The Arcturus situation changed a lot of plans," Reeves replied, nodding toward the corridor. "We need the best. And even with that fancy cane of yours, you're still the best tactical mind in the fleet." They walked together through the ship's heart, Daniel taking in the hum of the propulsion systems, the faint tang of recycled air, and the oily scent of freshly serviced corridors. Despite the upgrade's sleeker consoles, AI-integrated systems Intrepid still felt like a ship, still felt like home. "Your new first officer is already on the bridge," Reeves said casually, glancing sidelong at him. "Highly recommended. Top of her class." Daniel grunted, barely listening. His mind was already occupied with the mission parameters. The Arcturus system had gone dark 3 weeks ago. It wasn't supposed to happen. Arcturus 4 had a mining colony, light defenses, and a steady stream of communications. Silence wasn't just concerning, it was ominous. The bridge doors slid open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing the command center in its usual flurry of low voices and glowing screens. Daniel's eyes swept across the room, stopping dead at the tactical console. There she stood, lavender skin, unmistakable even under the cool lights. Her silver lilac hair was tied back in regulation fashion, yet still managed to frame her sharp features with elegance. She turned, and her eyes, those iridescent Lycian eyes that shimmered between violet and silver, met his. "Lieutenant Commander Talia Nicks. Reporting for duty, sir." Daniel froze. The last time he'd seen her, she was barely an adult, wide-eyed, and scrubbing deck plates on the Dauntless, part of the early Galactic integration program. Just another alien cadet trying to learn the customs of a fractured Terran fleet. "Talia," he said, his voice lower now, uncertain. She stepped forward, the faintest smile curling at the corner of her lips. "It's an honor to serve under." "Your command again, Captain." Daniel said nothing for a moment, the past roaring up behind his ribs. She was taller now, posture flawless, and her voice carried that signature Lycian melodic edge, like chimes muffled by wind. Admiral Reeves cleared his throat. "I'll leave you two to get reacquainted. Mission briefing is tomorrow, 0800. Intrepid departs at 12:20 hours." As Reeves exited, Daniel took a step closer, studying her features. She hadn't just grown, she'd hardened, matured. There was a quiet confidence in her now that couldn't be faked. "You were just a kid, running messages," he murmured. "And you were the hero of Proxima," she replied. "Things change." She gestured to the bridge with a hint of ceremony. but some things remain the same. Your ship awaits your orders." Daniel straightened slightly, an old ache pushing against his chest. Not physical, but something deeper. There was more to her than she was letting on. Her eyes weren't just meeting his, they were searching him. This wasn't going to be just another assignment. Something about Arcturus, about her, told him the past wasn't done with him yet. Not by a long shot. Asterisk, the command briefing room aboard the Intrepid was quieter than the bridge's thicker walls. Lower lighting and a tactical holomap glowing at its center. Star systems shimmered in rotating blue orbs. Arcturus blinking ominously in red. It wasn't just a silent system. It was a black hole of information, swallowing every probe and signal sent its way. Captain Harris stood with one hand, resting on the table's edge, his other gripping the top of his cane. Talia Nicks stood beside him, her eyes scanning the rotating starfield with an intensity that bordered on personal. 3 weeks, Admiral Reeves said, his voice clipped. No contact. Last transmission from the Arcturus mining colony mentioned. Unusual energy fluctuations. We lost their comms shortly after. Daniel leaned in, tapping a glowing cluster of data on the projected map. These readings, they matched Draconid phase shift patterns. I saw something similar at Proxima, just before the plasma storms. Talia's voice joined his, calm and analytical. And just before the Draconids deployed their early cloaking fields. This isn't random noise. They're active in that system. Daniel turned to her slowly. She hadn't hesitated. Hadn't even consulted a datapad. She knew. You've done your homework, Commander. I've made it my business to understand. Our enemies, she replied, tone even. Especially those who've hurt people I respect. A sentence lingered in the air. Daniel's gaze held hers for a moment too long. There were layers there. Respect, yes. But also grief, loyalty, regret, maybe even guilt. He didn't ask. Not yet. Admiral Reeves broke the silence. Intelligence. Agrees. If the Draconids are using Arcturus as a staging ground, they'll gain access to 3 major trade routes. Your orders are to investigate, assess any Draconid presence, and if necessary, neutralize it. Daniel exhaled through his nose. And if they've perfected phase shift tech since Proxima, we're heading in blind. The Intrepid has the latest countermeasures, Reeves said, though even he didn't sound confident. But yes, you'll be flying theoretical defenses into a potentially weaponized anomaly. Just like old times, Daniel muttered after. Debriefing, Daniel returned to his quarters. The ship hummed beneath his feet, familiar rhythm syncing with his heartbeat. The walls were bare, save for a small display case housing a few medals and a datapad showing his mission orders. He was pulling on his uniform jacket when the door chimed. Enter, he said. Talia stepped inside, datapad in hand. Crew manifest. Sir, and tactical readiness reports? Thank you, Commander. Sit if you've got time. She did, folding her legs with practiced grace. The datapad slid from her hand onto the table, but her posture didn't relax. Not completely. 15 years? Daniel said, studying her. Last I saw you, you were mopping floors and dreaming of command. I still am, she replied, with a faint smile. Except now I have a bridge to stand on. And after I left Proxima, I applied to the Academy. Her voice softened. Your recommendation helped. My? He paused. A memory surfaced, dusty and half forgotten. A routine crew evaluation, just before deployment. He'd written a short note something about demonstrated initiative beyond her station. Nothing he thought would go far. You said I had. Potential, Talia said. Those words opened doors. And I walked through all of them. Daniel nodded slowly. I'm glad it helped. She hesitated, then added, the Academy wasn't easy for Elysian, but I had something to prove. And now I'm here. They looked at each other for a beat. Old scars, old bonds. Daniel leaned forward. Tell me the truth. This mission, Arcturus, does it mean something to you? Talia blinked. Her voice didn't waver. Only what it means to the fleet. Daniel's gut told him that wasn't. The whole truth. But he let it go for now. The ship's come crackled to life overhead. Captain Harris to the bridge. We're approaching departure coordinates. Daniel rose, grabbing his cane. Duty calls, Commander. Together, they moved through the corridors toward the heart of the ship. Their steps fell in rhythm. Human and Lycian, mentor and protege, now equals. The bridge crew came to attention. As the doors hissed open. As you were, Daniel said, moving to the command chair. The seat welcomed him like an old friend. Status report. Coordinates for Arcturus jump, plotted and locked, reported Lieutenant Parker at helm. Daniel glanced to his right. Talia had taken her station at tactical, fingers dancing over. The controls. All departments report ready, sir, she said. Weapons online, shields at maximum. Daniel's voice was steady. Lieutenant Parker, take us out. Standard approach to jump coordinates. Aye, Captain. The Intrepid pulled away from dock, stars shifting in the main view screen. Daniel leaned back, gaze fixed on the void ahead. 15 years ago, he thought he'd given his last order. Now, he was heading back into the unknown with ghosts behind him, and a girl he barely knew anymore at his side. And in his bones. He felt it. This wasn't just another mission. It was the beginning of something far, far bigger. Asterisk. The Intrepid emerged from its FTL jump with a low groan reverberating through the hull, like the ship itself had been bruised by the transition. On the bridge, every officer tensed. Captain Harris gripped the armrest of his chair, the hum of his prosthetic leg vibrating faintly against the deck. Status. He barked. Coordinates are off by 0.3 parsecs. Lieutenant Parker replied, scanning his console. We're on the outer edge of the Arcturus system. Cause. Daniel's eyes narrowed, jaw tightening. Unknown, sir, Parker said, fingers flying over the readouts. Jump calculations were triple-checked. Talia was already on me. Move. She stepped over to the science station and began punching commands into the auxiliary scanner, her voice crisp. Detecting elevated energy readings across the system. Unstable temporal frequencies, localized gravitational inconsistencies. These could have disrupted our FTL exit vector. Daniel rose, tapping his cane as he crossed the deck to the view screen. On screen, the stars shimmered, and then Arcturus unfolded before them. The red giant pulsed at the center, its 7 planets orbiting as expected. At first glance, it was peaceful, calm, even. But something felt off. There was. A distortion. Barely visible, like the air itself shimmered between the celestial bodies. Magnify Sector 4. The image zoomed in. Daniel's breath caught. Space rippled unnaturally waves, bending light like heat off scorched metal. What the hell is that? He muttered. Phase shift distortions, Talia said, her voice quieter now. The Draconids haven't just perfected the technology. They've deployed it system-wide. Daniel's mind raced. The implications were staggering. Phase shift had been theoretical, dangerous, and unstable. The ability to bend matter partially out of time. And space, making it nearly invisible, nearly untouchable. A nightmare for any fleet trying to track, much less destroy. An enemy using it. Lieutenant Commander Ree, he said, turning to the tactical officer. Full spectrum sweep. I want every pocket of interference mapped and tagged. If there are ships hiding in those distortions, I want to know. Ree, a broad-shouldered man with a permanent scowl, nodded. Running full scan now, Captain. Talia's console chirped. I'm picking up a vessel on the edge of our sensor range. Faint signal. It's broadcasting an old Terran fleet IFFF tag. Daniel turned sharply. That's impossible. There shouldn't be any of our ships out here. Talia's hands moved across her console. Signal strength is weak, but the identifier is authentic. Registry matches. The horizon. The bridge went silent. Daniel stared at her. That's not possible, he said, his voice low and hollow. The horizon was destroyed at Proxima. I saw it happen. Talia turned to him. Sir, it's transmitting a distress call. Encrypted. Using your old command code. The blood drained from Daniel's face. That code had died with the ship. It wasn't just obsolete. It was buried, classified, erased from active systems. Orders, Captain? Ree asked, his hand hovering over the weapons interface. Daniel stood there for a moment, his mind flooding with memories he'd buried deep. The chaos of Proxima, the last sight of the horizon charging into enemy fire, sacrificing itself so the rest of the fleet could escape. Captain Mercer's final transmission. Static. Fire. Silence. His voice, when it came, was steel. Yellow alert. Set course for the signal's origin. Maintain distance. No closer than 20 kilometers. Aye. Sir? Parker replied, hands already guiding the ship through a slow arc. Tactical, Daniel added. Ready all weapons, but don't power them yet. If this is a trap, we're not going in blind. The Intrepid adjusted course, easing toward the coordinates. On screen, the flickering edge of the distortion grew clearer. Then the shape emerged. A battleship scorched and fractured, adrift in space. Her hull bore the unmistakable markings of the Terran fleet. The nameplate was half-charred, but still visible. TFV Horizon. Daniel stepped forward slowly, the years seeming to melt from his face. His hand tightened around the head of his cane. Life. Signs? He asked, voice barely audible. Talia scanned the data, her brow furrowed. Minimal power. Leaf support functioning in some sections. But the temporal distortions are interfering with sensor clarity. I can't confirm life signs. Ree's console beeped urgently. Captain movement inside the distortion fields. Multiple contacts. Draconid configuration. Daniel's eyes never left the horizon. They were waiting for us, he said grimly. They used her as bait. Sir, Talia called, more sharply now. The distress signal just changed. It's transmitting a data packet. Put it on screen. The main display split into one side, showing the horizon, the other displaying a short, encoded text message. The decryption was fast. The message, however, was anything but comforting. Paris, they pulled us out of time. 15 years for you. 3 days for us. Draconids using Horizon crew for experiments. Help us. Mercer. Daniel staggered back half a step. It hit harder than any plasma round. Mercer. Alive? He felt the weight of the years, the burden of ghosts he thought long buried. Now suddenly, they were back real, suffering, calling to him across the gulf of time. Sir, Ree called out, breaking the spell. Dreaded vessels decloaking. 3 warships. Heading straight for us. Red alert, Daniel snapped, shaking himself from the haze. Shields up. Weapons online. Evasive pattern Delta. The bridge erupted in motion. Lights flashed red. The Intrepid turned, veering away from the first salvo of Draconid fire that sliced through space like spears of white fire. Tactical. Return fire. Target their lead vessel. Disable propulsion. Hell bring us between them and the horizon. We're not leaving anyone behind. Talia turned toward him, eyes wide. Captain, we're outnumbered and outgunned. A rescue mission now would be high risk. Daniel cut in, steel in his voice. So was Proxima. His eyes locked with hers. Left them behind once, Commander. I won't do it again. And with that, the Intrepid dove into the heart of the ambush guns blazing, shields flaring, and the past crashing back into the present like a wave of fire and stars. Asterisk. The battle outside the Intrepid was chaos incarnate Draconid warships. Circling like wolves, their plasma lances flashing across the void in irregular, pulsing rhythms. The ship rocked violently as another blast impacted the starboard shield array. Sparks flew from an overloaded conduit near the tactical station. Ree barked status reports over the comms, his voice tight with tension. Shields at 82% holding, but they're concentrating fire on our aft quarter. Daniel gripped the arms of his command chair, absorbing the tremor that rolled through the deck plating. The forward display showed the drifting wreck of the horizon, caught between temporal distortion bands like a fly in amber. Ghostly ripples shimmered around her hull, bending light and time in equal measure. "Lieutenant Parker," Daniel said, voice steady, "bring us closer to the horizon, but stay outside." The distortion field. "I want our boarding party prepped now." Ree turned sharply. "Captain, you're planning a rescue op? With 3 dreaded warships bearing down on us?" Daniel's eyes flicked toward Talia, who was already scanning the distortion data. Her long fingers dancing across the interface like a concert pianist. "Commander Nicks," he said, "you're on point. Assemble a team and board the horizon. Find any survivors, assess damage, and gather intel on what exactly the Draconids are doing with that temporal tech." Talia didn't hesitate. "Understood, sir." Ree frowned. "Captain, with all due respect, she's your tactical officer. We need her here." Daniel turned to face her directly. "Can you handle this?" Talia looked up. "Yes, but I have additional knowledge." Ree's brow lifted. Daniel narrowed his eyes. "Additional?" Talia hesitated, then lowered her voice. "There are aspects of Draconid phase shift tech I didn't include in my service record. My time after Proxima. I was part of a classified Terran Lycian research initiative. We studied this extensively." "You're saying you've worked on phase shift technology?" Daniel asked, a dangerous edge creeping into his voice. She nodded. 5 years of black site research. I understand it better than most humans. Ever will. That's why I was assigned to Intrepid. This isn't a coincidence." Daniel studied her for a long moment. Trust, uncertainty, and something else flickered in his expression. Betrayal, maybe. But only for a breath. He exhaled slowly. "Fine. You lead the boarding party, but you bring them back, all of them. Especially Mercer." "I will," she said. Within minutes, Talia was in the shuttle bay with a 5-person team, 2 Marines, a medic, and an engineer. She stood at the ramp of a sleek boarding shuttle, locking a chronometric stabilizer around her wrist. Sergeant Mills, a grizzled Marine with a scar bisecting his brow, eyed the device warily. "That thing gonna stop us from getting turned inside out by time?" "It should," Talia said, "but stay close. Stray too far from me, and you could find yourself living a year in 30 seconds. The shuttle launched, weaving through enemy fire as the Intrepid provided covering suppression. Plasma bolts arced past them, one skimming so close the hull plating flared white-hot. Talia braced herself as the shuttle pierced the edge of the horizon's distortion field. The sensation was immediate. Reality twisted. Sound dulled. Light bent. Her stomach lurched as if the shuttle had fallen off a cliff made of time. "Hold steady," she called out. They latched onto the horizon's emergency airlock with a satisfying clunk. The airlock cycled, and the boarding team poured into the corridor beyond. Inside, the horizon was a graveyard. Asterisk, some corridors were pristine untouched, frozen in time. Others were weathered like tombs, the metal walls flaking with rust, the floor littered with shattered support struts. Bulkheads flickered between decades in an instant. The lights buzzed and faded, some glowing with steady white, others dim and orange with age. "This place is he." "Wrong," Chesterfield, the engineer, muttered, his eyes wide as they moved past a window showing stars that shifted in color every few seconds. Talia's stabilizer pulsed blue. Stick close. The temporal flow here isn't linear. Some decks are running 30 times faster than real space. Others barely moving at all. They moved in formation, passing through warped sectors that groaned and whispered with voices not quite present. A shimmer at the junction ahead warned of a boundary. Talia held up a hand. Activate stabilizers. Step through one at a time. Don't panic. She moved first. Crossing the boundary felt like being dragged backward through liquid fire and memory. When she emerged, the world on the other side was older everything, layered with dust and decay. A ceiling panel had collapsed years ago, or moments ago. It was impossible to say. Picking up life signs, said Lieutenant Reed, the medic. 2 decks up, clustered near the auxiliary control room. Let's move. They reached the control room minutes later. Talia worked the override panel manually, bypassing the frozen systems. The door groaned open. Inside stood 5 officers in Terran Fleet uniforms. They turned as one, eyes wide with disbelief. One of them gray-haired, pale, but unmistakably. Alive stepped forward. Terran Command? He rasped. After all this time? Talia lowered her weapon. Lieutenant Commander Talia Nicks, ISS Intrepid. We're here to evacuate you. The man's eyes narrowed, and a weary smile tugged at his mouth. Captain James Mercer. I thought we were dead. Talia stepped forward. According to the rest of the galaxy, you were. Mercer exhaled a broken laugh. Time's funny like that. His officers moved around them, some collapsing into chairs, others just staring at their rescuers like they were ghosts. For us, it's been 3 weeks, Mercer said. But different parts of the ship? It's chaos. There's crew on the lower decks who think it's been 3 days. Others have. Aged. Decades. And the Draconids. He turned grim. They bored us. Take people. Experiment. They're trying to weaponize the field. Talia's cum crackled. Commander Nicks. Daniel's voice came through, clipped and urgent. Draconid reinforcements have just arrived. 5 more ships. We've got maybe 15 minutes before we're overrun. Talia looked at Mercer. How many survivors? 43. Scattered through stable sectors. Talia did the math. The shuttle could take maybe 12. They'd never make it in time. Captain, she said, is the temporal drive core still active? Mercer frowned. Barely. But the Draconids modified it. It's in engineering deep in a fast time zone. If I can reach it, she said, I can collapse the field. Realign the ship. Give us time to evacuate everyone. Mercer hesitated. That's suicide. I have a plan, Talia replied. But I'll need your help. Daniel's voice rang again over the comm. Commander, make it fast. Talia looked at the wreckage around her, at the survivors clinging to Hope. And she made a promise, not aloud, but with every beat of her heart. They would not be left behind again. She would finish what Daniel started 15 years ago, even if it meant stepping into the very heart of time's chaos. Asterisk. The corridors between the auxiliary control room and engineering were a nightmare. Each intersection was a roulette, wheel of time itself, some frozen like snapshots, others decayed and aged beyond recognition. The deeper Talia and Captain Mercer moved into the horizon, the more warped the ship became. Doors hung off hinges. Flickering holopads glitched in and out of coherence, and the occasional shimmer warned of boundaries where time flowed like a torrent or not at all. They paused outside a sealed bulkhead. Beyond it lay one of the ship's most volatile zones, engineering, where the Draconids had fused alien temporal machinery with Terran systems. Talia adjusted the power settings on her chronometric stabilizer. Readings suggest time in there is flowing at 15 times standard. That's about a year for every 4 minutes we stay. Mercer checked his as well. Our stabilizers will buy us 20 minutes at best. After that, we start aging fast. The tension between them crackled, but it wasn't fear, it was determination. Mercer had made peace with the idea of dying aboard the Horizon. Talia hadn't. Ready? She asked. Mercer gave a short nod. Let's finish this. They passed through the boundary. The sensation was a crushing wave of nausea and vertigo. Reality-blurred walls seemed to breathe. The deck flexed like muscle, and light became fragmented. And color shifted. Talia stumbled forward, but kept her feet, locking her stabilizer's resonance field tighter. Around her. Engineering was barely recognizable. Alien tech pulsed from every console, twisting vines of biometal infused with shimmering crystal nodes. At the center of the chamber stood the temporal core, a crystalline engine that refracted the room around it like a fractured mirror. It hovered slightly above its housing, rotating in impossible patterns, flickering in and out of sync with the visible world. Talia's breath caught. It's beautiful and completely wrong. Mercer crossed to an auxiliary console. Draconid control systems are still active. If we touch the core without a clean override, it could trigger a recursive cascade. I'm not reversing the field anymore, Talia replied, already pulling a toolkit from her back. I'm destabilizing it, creating a controlled collapse. That'll bring the entire Horizon back into normal spacetime for a window of 30 minutes. Long enough to evacuate. Mercer looked at her, surprised. How controlled is this collapse? Controlled enough to give us a chance. She didn't look up, but not enough to leave the Horizon intact. As she worked, the ship trembled again, this time, not from temporal stress. The floor beneath them shook subtly with distant impacts. Talia's comm sputtered, then cleared. Harris to Nicks. We're engaging enemy reinforcements. Shields at 38%. Holding the line, but we don't have long. Repeat, we don't have long. Understood, Captain, she said, her voice tight. Initiating core destabilization now. Her hands moved quickly over the alien interface, bypassing Draconid encryption with codes she hadn't admitted she knew. The screen scrolled with warning glyphs, and the core began to emit a deep, thrumming hum like a heartbeat stretched across time. I'm setting a 30-minute countdown, she told Mercer. After that, the core will implode, neutralizing the temporal distortions and disabling Draconid tech across the sector. Mercer, standing at a secondary console, quickly downloaded the Horizon's internal logs. Fleet Command needs to see this, everything: the experiments, the ship logs, the Draconid interface specs. This is proof. Talia's stabilizer beeped a sharp warning. 5 minutes of safe time left, she said. We have to go. They moved fast, retracing their route through the fractured ship. Passing through distortion after distortion, Talia could feel the strain on her body, small aches in her joints, her head pounding from maintaining the stabilizer's frequency. They reached the auxiliary control room, just as Sergeant Mills reported in. We've rounded up 30 survivors, ma'am. They're in safe zones waiting for evac. Then we move, Talia commanded. Shuttle 1 launches now. Captain Mercer, you're on it. Mercer shook his head. A captain leaves last. You're not the captain anymore, Talia said, firmly, and your knowledge is more important to the fleet than your pride. A beat passed, and then Mercer nodded. Just make sure it means something. The shuttle launched, carrying its fragile cargo back toward the Intrepid, which was still dancing between streaks of enemy fire. The second and third waves of evacuees followed, each shuttle escaping with seconds to spare between passes. Talia coordinated the extractions with military precision, directing her team across fragmented decks and guiding survivors through distortions with just enough protection to hold them stable. Her chronometric stabilizer was nearly depleted now, flashing red warnings every few seconds. The final group had gathered 8 survivors, including herself and Lieutenant Reed. But just as they reached the shuttle, a sudden explosion tore through the corridor above. "Enemy boarding party," someone shouted. Talia turned sharply. "Get aboard now. I'll hold them off." Reed grabbed her arm. "You won't make it back in time. There's an escape pod 1 deck below. I'll rendezvous. Go." The hatch sealed behind them. She turned and ran down a side corridor already flickering with warning klaxons and burning conduit lines. She could hear the heavy footfalls of Draconid soldiers behind her, now hissing, alien growls echoing through the halls. She vaulted over a fallen support beam, ducked a bolt of phase fire that shimmered like liquid lightning, and threw herself into the escape pod bay. Her stabilizer was nearly dead. The escape pod jettisoned with a violent thump, spinning for a moment before righting itself. The viewport filled with the sight of the horizon, surrounded by shimmering, collapsing energy fields, and the Intrepid, bristling with firepower, holding the line like a steel wall. Talia activated the emergency beacon. Seconds later, the Intrepid's tractor beam locked on Dot inside the pod, panting and pale. She heard the voice she hadn't realized she'd been waiting for. "Harris to Nicks," Daniel said, voice steady. "We have you on scope." "Hang on, we're bringing you in." The escape pod docked. When the hatch hissed open, Daniel was standing there. His face was taut, but his eyes held a flicker of something rare relief. "Commander," he said quietly, "welcome back." Talia stepped onto the deck. "Mission complete. Core destabilized. Evac successful." He nodded once. "Then let's get out of here." As they strode toward the bridge, alarms continued to sound. The horizon drifted behind them, wrapped in a web of collapsing time. The countdown ticked. Draconid vessels closed in, desperate to contain the damage, to stop the Terran ship from escaping with the truth. But they were too late. Talia returned to tactical. Daniel took his chair. "Status?" He barked. "Evac complete. All survivors accounted for. Enemy ships regrouping. FTL drive spooling 3 minutes to jump." Daniel's eyes stayed on the forward display, where the horizon pulsed one last time, its temporal field flickering. "Out of control, Talia?" he asked. "Core will implode in under 2 minutes," she said, hands moving rapidly. "Temporal wave incoming." Daniel gave one final order. "Let's ride the edge of the storm." And the Intrepid turned toward the breach toward time's final breath and charged, headlong through the dark. The Intrepid surged forward, streaking toward the shrinking gap between the horizon and the closing Draconid formation. The stars twisted in the view screen as the vessel accelerated, her hull groaning under the strain of both speed and spatial interference. "Status on the horizon?" Captain Harris demanded, voice firm but tight. Talia didn't look up from her tactical console. "Core instability accelerating. Collapse in 1 minute, 43 seconds. Temporal distortions are becoming volatile. This isn't going to be a clean detonation." On screen, the horizon now pulsed with blinding light. Its structure appeared to vibrate in and out of visibility, phasing between past and present, like a ghost trapped in a storm of its own making. Lieutenant Parker's voice cut in from helm. "FTO not ready. We'll be inside the blast radius." At Sublight, Daniel's jaw clenched. "Divert all non-essential power to structural integrity and shields." "Talia, can we ride it?" "I've recalibrated the deflector array to emit a counter-resonance field," she said, sweat forming at her brow. "It should bend the temporal wave around us instead of letting it tear through. But it's never been tested." "It is now," Daniel said. The bridge crew moved like clockwork under pressure. Relaunched suppressive fire at the Draconid fleet as the Intrepid barreled forward. Explosions burst like flares in space as one enemy ship's engines ruptured under fire. The others maneuvered, trying to intercept. Draconids forming a blockade, Talia warned. They're trying to trap us between them and the core. Not today, Daniel growled. Commander, retarget their propulsion clusters. Make us a path. Aye, Captain. The Intrepid's batteries roared to life, unleashing a torrent of energy into the lead Draconid vessel. The blast punched through weakened shields, sending the alien warship spinning. The path cleared, but the Horizon's core was reaching critical mass. Talia's voice cut through the rising tension. 20 seconds to temporal collapse. The ship trembled. Lights dimmed. On the screen, the Horizon erupted not like a traditional explosion, but like a stone breaking the surface of still water. Space rippled outward in concentric waves, each one distorting everything it touched, twisting gravity, shattering light. Counter-resonance field activating, Talia said. The Intrepid shuddered as the field engaged. A shimmering blue dome flared around the vessel, crackling with unstable energy. The wave hit. Time fractured. Everyone on the bridge saw it. Movement slowed, stretched, doubled. Lieutenant Parker's hand blurred, then stuttered, then froze. Ree's shout echoed and looped, as if repeating across dimensions. Daniel gripped the arms of his chair, his knuckles white, his vision warping as sound and motion folded into themselves. Talia stood firm, her hands locked on the deflector controls, feeding the stabilizer's real-time frequency adjustments. The readouts on her console shifted faster than thought, but she matched them beat for beat. Hold it, she whispered, more to herself than the ship, just a little longer. And then the wave passed. Silence fell. The stars returned to their places, the decks stilled beneath them. The horizon was gone, erased, not exploded, vaporized by time's rejection. The Draconid ships nearby hadn't been so lucky. Some hung in space, partially phased, torn apart mid-maneuver. Others drifted, frozen in time loops or locked in twisted configurations, living monuments to their own arrogance. Ree spoke first, his voice ragged. Shields at 5%. FTL systems green. No hull breaches. Parker followed. Jump drive is ready. Coordinates locked for Terran Fleet Command. Daniel exhaled slowly and turned to Talia. Looked exhausted. Pale, but alive. Damage from the wave? Minor, she said, blinking away the afterimages. The counterfield worked, barely. Daniel nodded, then straightened in his chair. Lieutenant Parker, get us home. The stars elongated, then vanished as the Intrepid leapt into FTL hours. Later, the ship docked at Terran Fleet Command, orbiting above Earth. Her hull bore the scars of battle, but her crew, every last one, was accounted for. Debriefings began immediately. The data retrieved from the horizon shocked the Joint Chiefs. The extent of Draconid experimentation, the truth of the temporal field, and the logs Captain Mercer had downloaded. Most of all, it revealed something terrifying. This was not the only experiment. In the observation lounge overlooking Earth, Talia stood alone. She watched the swirl of clouds, the shimmer of oceans. She hadn't seen Earth from orbit in years. Behind her, the door opened. Daniel walked in, slower now, still favoring his prosthetic, still wearing that same long brown coat. Beautiful. Isn't it? He said. Yes, she replied. Even after all this. He stepped beside her. You did more than save a ship, Talia. You gave a piece of history back to the fleet. To me, she nodded, but didn't speak. I got a report, he continued. The initiative's been declassified. Your status, too. Admiral Reeves wants you reassigned. She looked over, guarded. I understand. Daniel reached into his coat and handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a silver star medallion, the Star of Valor. You earned this, he said. Talia swallowed hard. Thank you, Captain. He raised a brow. Still want the reassignment? She hesitated. Then shook her head. Not unless you're done with me. He smiled. Not even close. Commander Nicks, the Intrepid, needs her first officer. And I need her captain, she replied softly. Their eyes met, and something settled between them, respect forged through fire. A bond no longer rooted in hierarchy, but shared survival. They turned together to the viewport, watching a shuttle rise from Earth's surface. Daniel spoke again, voice quiet. 15 years ago, you were a kid scrubbing decks. Now you're standing here, having saved lives, fought off warships, and bent time around a starship. Talia's lips curved into a small smile. It's been educational, Daniel chuckled. Let's see what else the stars have in store. And together, they walked back toward the command deck, toward whatever came next, side by side. Beyond the glass. Earth spun on in its eternal rhythm, and somewhere out there, in the deep dark, time itself waited to be challenged again. Asterisk.